Trump literally said this week, Starmer is no Churchill. Yes, that's right. Truer words were never spoken. It increasingly looks as though Keir Starmer is focused on strengthening ties with a very different constituency, his own Muslim vote here in Britain. Interesting, that. Now, look, that might sound quite blunt, but let's look at the political geography of this whole thing this week. On one hand, we've got Starmer, who's been talking about the importance of closer cooperation between the Anglosphere in Britain, working more closely with Australia, Anthony Albanese, Canada's Mark Carney, and New Zealand in this sort of alliance that used to be the cornerstone of Western diplomacy as we know it. But back in London, our Prime Minister attended an iftar event during Ramadan last night, posing for sort of photographs, greeting community leaders, including a very, very cozy meetup with the Palestinian ambassador. Yes, they were quite literally rubbing against each other in this video. Look, the real story here isn't the iftar dinner. It's actually the timing of it, because Labour is increasingly aware that parts of an electoral coalition are restless, particularly over the war in Gaza and Britain's position on it. And the pressure is becoming politically very significant here. They lost a massive election just a few days ago. I was there. They basically lost both the Liberal and the Muslim votes simultaneously to our version of the Greens Party, which isn't much different to what you have over in Australia. For decades, the party assumed overwhelming support in many urban constituencies and predominantly Muslim populations that they had in them. But the recent elections have shown that loyalty can't simply be taken for granted anymore. And that helps explain the shift in tone that we've seen from our dear Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Early in the conflict, he emphasized that Israel has a right to defend itself. But more recently, I'm talking days ago, this language has shifted towards humanitarian concerns and calls for restraint. I wonder where that came from. Western politics is changing. Make a note of it. Governments are trying to hold together very broad coalitions of voters, progressive metropolitan activists, traditional working class communities, and politically engaged faith groups. These priorities don't always line up neatly, and managing these tensions is becoming one of the defining tests of modern leadership in the West. But for Keir Starmer, that balancing act is now becoming very visible, and the people can see exactly why he's flip-flopping. It's to pick up votes. It's as simple as that, but it's very craven. The question is whether it can be sustained and whether those competing pressures eventually pull this government in entirely different directions. Will the West survive this fracture? That is the question.
And when you think about it, Keir Starmer and Anthony Albanese are like two peas in a pod, because both pander to communities for votes rather than their own allies in the West. It's just astonishing.